The notification glowed on my phone screen at 2:47 a.m. Your husband's location has changed to the Riverside Apartments. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Daniel had told me he'd be working late at the office downtown. The Riverside Apartments were on the opposite side of the city, tucked away in a neighborhood where young professionals lived in overpriced studios with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. My finger hovered over his contact. Call him? Confront him? Instead, I opened the location app again, watching the blue dot pulse steadily from that address. It didn't move. He was inside somewhere, staying put. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have had this app on my phone. 3 months ago, I trusted my husband completely. But 3 months ago, everything changed when Daniel came home from work, sat me down at our kitchen table, and said the words that would unravel our entire marriage. Lauren, I need to start seeing a therapist. I should have been supportive. I should have been relieved that he was prioritizing his mental health. Instead, sitting in our dark bedroom now, watching that blue, refuse to move, I felt the weight of every lie, every excuse, every therapy session that had pulled him further away from me. Because 2 hours ago, I'd finally worked up the courage to call the number on the business card he'd left casually on his nightstand. Dr. Rebecca Winters, licensed therapist, it read in elegant script. The phone had rung 4 times before a cheerful automated message picked up. You've reached Café Meridian. We're currently closed, but we'll reopen tomorrow at 7 a.m. for your morning coffee needs. A cafe. Not a therapist's office. A cafe. And now my husband was at the Riverside Apartments at 3 in the morning, and I knew with absolute certainty that our marriage was built on something far more fragile than I'd ever imagined. 6 months earlier, life had been beautifully ordinary. Daniel and I had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We'd met at a mutual friend's wedding, both of us cynical about the whole affair, making quiet jokes about the overwrought vows while everyone else cried. We'd bonded over our shared skepticism, our practical approach to love. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just 2 people who fit together comfortably, like puzzle pieces that didn't require force. He was a senior analyst at a tech consulting firm. I managed operations for a mid-sized marketing agency. We had a modest house in a decent neighborhood, talked vaguely about kids someday, and spent our weekends hiking or trying new restaurants. Nothing extraordinary, but it was ours, and I'd been genuinely happy. The change started small. Daniel became distracted during dinner, scrolling through his phone more than usual. He started going to the gym at odd hours. He bought new clothes, subtle upgrades that made him look sharper, more polished. When I complimented him, he'd shrug it off with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just trying to take better care of myself, he'd say. Then came the mood swings. He'd be distant for days, barely speaking beyond functional necessities, then suddenly affectionate, bringing me flowers or suggesting spontaneous date nights. The inconsistency made me feel like I was constantly trying to read a book with missing pages. One evening in late March, I found him sitting in his car in our driveway, just staring at the steering wheel. When I knocked on the window, he'd startled like I'd woken him from a dream. "Are you okay?" I'd ask when he finally came inside. "I don't know," he'd said, and the honesty in his voice had frightened me. "I feel like I'm drowning, Lauren. Like there's this weight on my chest all the time, and I can't figure out why." That's when he'd suggested therapy. He'd been researching it, he said. He'd even found someone who came highly recommended, someone who specialized in helping people navigate career stress and relationship anxiety. "I think it could really help," he told me, taking my hands in his. "I want to be better. For you. For us." How could I argue with that? How could I be anything but supportive? So I'd encouraged him. I'd rearranged my schedule to accommodate his Tuesday and Thursday evening sessions. I'd given him space when he came home looking emotionally drained. I'd ask gentle questions about how therapy was going, and he'd give vague but positive responses. "Dr. Winters is really helping me work through some things," he'd say. "She's brilliant. She has this way of making you see patterns you never noticed before." Dr. Winters. Rebecca Winters. The name had become a constant presence in our home, mentioned casually but frequently enough that I'd started to picture her. I imagined an older woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. Someone maternal and wise. The first real crack in my trust came 6 weeks into his therapy. I'd been folding laundry when I noticed a new cologne bottle on his dresser. Not the woody, subtle scent he usually wore, but something brighter, more expensive. When I'd asked about it, he'd gotten defensive. I can't buy new cologne?
Of course you can.
I was just asking. It was on sale. I liked how it smelled. Is that okay with you? The sharpness in his tone had stung.
We never talk to each other like that.
But I'd let it go. I'd made excuses. The therapy was bringing up difficult emotions. He was processing. He needed patience. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, his phone would buzz, and he'd grab it immediately, stepping out onto the porch or into his car to take the call. When I'd ask who it was, he'd say it was work, or his brother, or sometimes just nothing important. Once, I'd picked up his phone by accident, thinking it was mine. A text notification was displayed on the lock screen. I keep thinking about what you said.
Can't wait to see you again.
No name. Just a number. Who's texting you? I'd asked when he came back into the room. He'd glanced at the phone, and something had flickered across his face.
Panic?
Guilt?
Just a colleague.
About a project. It doesn't sound like work. Lauren, I'm not doing this right now. He'd taken the phone and walked away, leaving me standing there feeling foolish and paranoid. That's when I'd installed the location sharing app. Not to spy, I told myself. Just for safety.
Just so I'd know he was okay.
For weeks, the app confirmed his stories. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, his location showed him at an office building downtown where several therapists rented space. He'd stay for exactly 50 minutes, then head home. Everything checked out. Until last week. I'd been having lunch with my friend Monica when she'd mentioned her own therapist. I've been seeing Dr. Patterson for 2 years now. She's been a lifesaver. Daniel just started therapy, I'd said. With a Dr. Rebecca Winters. Monica had frowned. Winters? I don't think I've heard of her. What practice is she with? I'm not sure. He found her through a recommendation. Later that night, curiosity had gotten the better of me. I'd Googled Dr. Rebecca Winters therapist and found nothing. I'd searched the state licensing board. No results. I'd even checked the office building where his location always showed him on therapy nights. The directory listed 3 therapists, none named Rebecca Winters. That's when I looked at the business card more carefully. Really looked at it. The cardstock was expensive, the printing professional. But there was no address. No website. Just a name, a title, and a phone number. The phone number that connected to a cafe. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the blue at the Riverside Apartments until it moved at 5:30 a.m., heading back toward our house. I was in bed, eyes closed, pretending to sleep when Daniel slipped in beside me, smelling like unfamiliar sheets and guilt. The next morning, I called in sick to work. After Daniel left for the office, I drove to the Riverside Apartments. It was a modern building, all glass and steel, with a coffee shop on the ground floor and a doorman who looked bored behind his desk. I sat in my car across the street for an hour, feeling ridiculous, feeling desperate. Then she walked out. She was nothing like the maternal therapist I'd imagined. She was young, maybe 28, with glossy dark hair that fell past her shoulders and the kind of effortless style that came from money and confidence. She wore designer jeans and a silk blouse, oversized sunglasses perched on her head. She looked like someone who belonged in a magazine spread, not a therapist's office. But what made my blood run cold was what happened next. A man exited the building behind her, jogging to catch up. He touched her arm, said something that made her laugh. She turned, and even from across the street, I could see the intimacy in their body language. The way she leaned into him. The way his hand lingered at the small of her back. The man was my husband. They walked together down the street, stopping at the same coffee shop, whose number was on that business card. Through the window, I watched them sit across from each other, watched Daniel reach across the table to take her hand, watched her smile at him with the kind of warmth that made my chest feel like it was caving in. I sat frozen in my car, unable to move, unable to process what I was seeing. Then I pulled out my phone and started searching. Rebecca Winters wasn't a therapist, but she was very real. Her social media was private, but her LinkedIn told me everything I needed to know. She worked in marketing at a tech startup. Before that, she'd been at the same consulting firm where Daniel worked. In fact, they'd overlapped there for 2 years. I scrolled through her profile pictures, my hands shaking. In one photo from 3 years ago, there was a group shot from an office party.
I zoomed in.
There, in the back, was Daniel, younger, smiling widely with his arm around another colleague. And beside him, laughing at something off camera, was Rebecca. They'd known each other. They'd worked together. And now she was pretending to be his therapist while they did whatever this was. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just that he was cheating, though that alone was devastating, but the elaborate lie of it all. The therapy story. The business card. The carefully maintained schedule. Every time I'd supported him, encouraged him, given him space for his mental health, he'd been with her. I'd been so stupid.
So trusting.
So pathetically eager to believe that my husband was just going through a rough patch, that we'd come out stronger on the other side. I thought about confronting them right there, storming into the cafe, and making a scene. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the knowledge that I needed to be smart about this, not emotional. So I took photos. I documented everything. And then I drove home and started planning. I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. I took screenshots of his location history. I found receipts for expensive dinners on nights he'd claimed to be at therapy. I discovered a second email account full of messages between him and Rebecca that made me feel physically ill. I can't keep lying to her, he'd written in one message from 2 months ago. This is killing me. Then leave her, Rebecca had replied. You said you would. You said once you figured things out with a therapist angle, you'd have time to plan everything properly. So that was it. The therapy wasn't a cover for an affair. It was a strategy for leaving me, a way to create distance, to establish a narrative where he was struggling, where our marriage was failing through no one's fault, where eventually he could say he'd discovered himself in therapy and needed to make changes. And I'd been complicit in my own destruction, cheerfully supporting his journey. On Thursday evening, I got ready. I wore the dress Daniel had always loved, did my makeup carefully, styled my hair. When he came downstairs, already dressed to leave, he stopped short. You look beautiful, he said, and I heard genuine appreciation in his voice. It made me want to scream. Thank you, I said calmly. Are you heading to therapy?
Yeah.
Should be back around 8:30. Actually, I said, picking up my purse, I thought I'd come with you today. His face went white.
What?
I want to meet Dr. Winters. I've been thinking about maybe starting therapy too, and since you've had such a good experience with her, I thought it would be nice to get a recommendation in person. Lauren, that's not therapy, doesn't work like that. You can't just show up to someone else's session. I'll wait outside. I just want to meet her briefly. I smiled, watching him scramble for excuses. She's very private about her clients. It wouldn't be appropriate. Then give me her number. I'll call and make my own appointment. I don't think she's taking new clients. Strange. The number on her business card goes to a cafe. Did you know that? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's expression cycled through confusion, panic, and finally resignation. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough. I sat across from him, maintaining my composure, even though I was shaking inside. Tell me everything, Daniel. You owe me that much. He looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. Real tears. But I'd stopped caring whether his emotions were genuine. I didn't plan this, he began. That's how you're starting? With a cliché? Lauren, please. No. My voice was sharp now, cutting. You don't get to control this conversation. You've controlled everything else for 3 months. Now it's my turn. Who is she really? He took a shaky breath. We worked together 3 years ago. Before I met you. You met me 7 years ago. Before we got serious. We dated for a few months. It ended badly. She moved to a different company and I thought that was it. But it wasn't. She reached out in February. Said she was back in town, wanted to catch up. I told her I was married, that it wouldn't be appropriate. But she was persistent. She said she just wanted closure, to apologize for how things ended. And you met her? Once. For coffee. I swear, Lauren, I went planning to make it clear that I was happily married. But when I saw her again, he trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. You fell right back in love. It wasn't love. It was, I don't know, nostalgia? She represented this time in my life when everything felt full of possibility. Before mortgages and career pressure and adult responsibilities, being with her felt like being young again. So you decided to throw away our marriage for a fantasy. I didn't know what to do. I was confused. The therapy story just kind of happened. She thought it was funny at first, this inside joke. Then it became useful. It gave us time together without suspicion. You used my compassion against me, I said, my voice breaking slightly. You made me complicit in my own betrayal. Every time I asked about your session, every time I gave you space to work on yourself, I was actually just making it easier for you to be with her. I'm so sorry. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Are you in love with her? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I don't know, he finally said. I love you too. I'm so confused about everything. You don't get to be confused anymore. I stood, looking down at him. I know everything, Daniel. I have screenshots, emails, photos. I know she's at the Riverside Apartments. I know you've been spending nights there. I know you've been planning to leave me. His face crumbled. Lauren, I want you out of this house by tomorrow. I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from her next week. Can we talk about this? Please? Maybe we can work through. Work through what? I felt my carefully maintained composure starting to crack. You didn't just cheat, Daniel. You created an elaborate lie that made me question my own instincts. You made me feel guilty for being suspicious. You turned my support into a weapon. That's not something you work through. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. Repeatedly. Deliberately. With planning and forethought. I grabbed my purse. I'm going to stay with Monica tonight. When I come back tomorrow evening, I want you gone. Take whatever you need, but don't you dare take anything that's not clearly yours. Where are you going right now? I paused at the door, looking back at him. He looked small, diminished, sitting on our couch in our living room that we'd furnished together, surrounded by the life we'd built. To the Riverside Apartments. To meet Rebecca Winters in person. I think she deserves to know that her boyfriend has been telling me he loves me and is confused about everything. That he's been crying to me about how much the situation is tearing him apart. Let's see how she feels about being the other woman when she realizes she might not be the sure thing she thought she was. Lauren, don't. But I was already out the door. The doorman at the Riverside Apartments tried to stop me, but I was past caring about propriety. I'm here to see Rebecca Winters, I said firmly. Apartment 412. And before you say you need to call up, you should know I'm the wife of the man who's been spending nights here. So either let me up, or I'll make a scene in your lobby that will have every resident complaining. He let me up. I knocked on apartment 412 with more confidence than I felt. When Rebecca opened the door, her expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something like fear. You must be Lauren, she said, and to her credit, she didn't try to close the door. Can I come in? She stepped aside. Her apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Tastefully decorated, modern, expensive. The kind of place that screamed young professional with money to spare. How did you find out? She asked, leaning against her kitchen counter. Does it matter? I suppose not. We stood there, two women bound together by one man's cowardice, neither quite sure how to proceed with this conversation. Did you know he was married when you contacted him? I asked. Yes. The honesty surprised me. And you didn't care? I told myself we were just friends at first, that we were just catching up. But yes, I knew what I was doing. She crossed her arms. If you're here for an apology, I'm not sure I can give you one that would mean anything. I don't want an apology. I want you to know that he told me tonight that he's confused. That he doesn't know if he loves you. That he loves me too. Something flickered in her expression. He's been telling me he's been sleeping in the guest room for months. That you barely talk anymore, except to fight. That the marriage has been over for a long time. We've had sex 3 times in the last 2 weeks. We went to dinner on Saturday and laughed until my sides hurt. Last Sunday, we spent the entire afternoon planning a trip to Portugal for our 5th anniversary. Her face hardened. You're lying. Am I? Or is he lying to both of us? I pulled out my phone, showing her photos from our recent date night, screenshots of affectionate text messages. He's been playing both sides, Rebecca. Keeping me invested while building a life with you. You thought you were his escape from a dead marriage. I thought therapy was helping him reconnect with me. We were both wrong. She looked at the photos for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that you didn't win. There's no prize here. You got a liar and a coward who's going to do this same thing to you eventually. Because people who lie this elaborately don't change. And what about you? You're just going to let him go. I already have. I walked toward the door, then paused. He'll probably come here tonight after I leave him. He'll be devastated, apologetic. He'll tell you I'm crazy, that I blindsided him, that our marriage really was over. Don't believe him. But also, go ahead and comfort him. Build your relationship on the ashes of my marriage. Just know that those ashes are all you'll ever have. 3 months later, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the last of the divorce papers. He didn't fight you on anything, Sarah, my attorney, said with some surprise. Given his initial posturing, I expected this to drag out much longer. I think he felt guilty, I said, though guilt seemed like an inadequate word for what Daniel had felt in the aftermath of everything. After I'd left Rebecca's apartment that night, Daniel had indeed gone to her. But instead of the consoling reunion he'd probably expected, he'd walked into a situation where Rebecca now knew he'd been lying to her as extensively as he'd lied to me. According to Monica, who heard it from a friend who knew someone in their circle, that conversation had ended with Rebecca throwing him out. He'd shown up at Monica's house at midnight, devastated, begging to talk to me. I'd refused. He'd sent long emails that I'd read once and then archived. He'd left voicemails that I'd deleted without listening to. Eventually, he'd moved into a corporate apartment and agreed to all my terms for the divorce. The house would be mine. Assets split fairly, no contest. He'd even offered to pay my legal fees. I'd said no to that. I didn't want his money born from guilt. I wanted a clean break. What will you do now? Sarah asked as I gathered my copies of the paperwork. I'm taking that trip to Portugal, I said. The one we'd planned for our anniversary. But I'm going alone. Good for you. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. The grief had been overwhelming at first, not just for the marriage, but for the person I'd believed Daniel to be, for the life I'd thought we were building together. I'd cycled through anger, sadness, regret, and back to anger again. But somewhere in those 3 months, I'd started to reclaim myself. I'd gone to actual therapy with a real therapist I'd carefully vetted. I'd reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I'd thrown myself into work and earned a promotion. I'd learned to be alone without being lonely. The hardest part hadn't been Daniel's betrayal. It had been acknowledging my own part in ignoring the warning signs. I'd been so invested in our comfortable life that I'd chosen comfort over truth, even when the truth was staring me in the face. But I was done with comfortable. Comfortable had made me complacent. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Rebecca at a bookstore. We both froze, recognizing each other instantly. For a moment, I considered turning away, pretending I hadn't seen her. But curiosity won out. Lauren, she said, her voice careful. Rebecca. We stood there in the fiction section, 2 women bound by history neither of us had chosen. I wanted to. She started, then stopped. I don't know what I wanted to say. You don't owe me anything. Did you know he tried to get back with me? She said suddenly. After you filed for divorce. He showed up at my apartment with flowers and apologies. Said he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. That he'd choose me if I'd just give him another chance. What did you say? I said no. She shifted her books from one arm to the other. Because you were right. About what kind of person he is. About the lies. I started noticing them even before you showed up that night. Little inconsistencies. Times when his stories didn't quite add up. But I'd wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored it. We both did. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not because I think it changes anything, but because you deserved better than what we both put you through. I studied her face, looking for insincerity, but found only regret. Thank you for saying that. Are you happy now? She asked. The question surprised me. Was I happy? I thought about my life now, the quiet mornings in my house, the freedom to make decisions without compromise, the way I'd started painting again, something I'd given up years ago. The trip to Portugal I'd taken alone, where I'd spent 2 weeks discovering that I actually enjoyed my own company. The date I had scheduled for next week with someone new, someone who made me laugh without the weight of history complicating everything. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Are you? I'm trying. We parted ways after that, two people who'd been caught in the same man's web of lies, both working our way free. A year after the divorce, I was cleaning out a closet when I found the business card. Dr. Rebecca Winters, licensed therapist. The card that had unraveled my entire marriage with a single phone call. I turned it over in my hands, thinking about how much had changed. How much I'd changed. Then I threw it away. Because that's what you do with beautiful lies. You acknowledge them, you learn from them, and then you let them go. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the man I'd been seeing for 3 months now. Still on for dinner tonight? Absolutely, I typed back. Looking forward to it.
And I meant it.
Not because Marcus was perfect or because our relationship was some grand romance, but because it was real.
Honest.
Built on truth rather than carefully constructed deceptions. I'd learned the hard way that comfort and complacency were enemies of truth. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is demand honesty, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew. Daniel had taught me that I deserved better than pretty lies. That lesson had cost me 4 years of marriage, thousands of dollars in legal fees, and months of heartbreak. But in return, I'd gained something invaluable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to walk away from anything that required me to silence my instincts. That I could rebuild my life from scratch and find not just survival, but joy on the other side. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. By the way, my mom wants to meet you. No pressure, but she's going to be in town next month. Thought I should give you fair warning. I smiled. Meeting the parents. A step forward. A sign of something real building between us. I'd love to meet her, I wrote back. And I meant that too. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of vulnerability, not of trusting again, not of the possibility of being hurt. I'd survived the worst kind of betrayal, the kind that came wrapped in concern and care, and I'd emerged stronger. The therapy sessions were over. The lies were in the past. And I was finally genuinely free. 2 years after everything fell apart, I got an unexpected email from Daniel. Lauren, I hope you're well. I won't take up much of your time, but I wanted you to know that I've been in actual therapy for the past 18 months. Real therapy, with a real therapist. It's been hard, facing what I did to you, understanding why I did it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it away for a fantasy that was never real. I heard you're happy now. I'm glad. You deserve every bit of happiness you find.
I'm sorry, Lauren.
For everything. Daniel. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. There was a time when those words would have meant everything to me. When I would have clung to that apology, dissected it, maybe even responded with my own careful words. But that time had passed. I didn't need his apology to move forward. I didn't need his acknowledgement to feel whole. His guilt was his burden to carry, not mine. I never responded to the email. It wasn't cruelty, it was closure. Some endings don't need a final conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away and never look back. And that's exactly what I did.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.